Greetings, friends of St. Bartholomew. It's a pleasure and honor again to be preaching from here in my home in Los Angeles. I've always been captivated by this reading from First Kings that we heard. It's such a visceral and disorienting passage to encounter. Elijah is running for his life, and he stands on this mountain waiting for God to pass by. And there comes a great wind, so strong as to split mountains into pieces, and then an earthquake, and then a fire. And God is not in any of these. And then there's the sound, it says, of sheer silence, or sometimes translated as a still small voice. And the imagery always reminds me of the untamed forces of life, and yet the steady presence of God in the midst of it. A couple weeks ago, I had a 2-hour private surfing lesson with my oldest son, Caleb, who's 13 years old. I got him this birthday gift a while back, and finally we had the chance to do this. And I've been interested in surfing for a long time, but never really dove in. And our instructor, I'm just going to call him young, cool surfer dude. I mean, he was throwing a lot of dudes out there and saying, you guys are going to catch some sick waves. I mean, it was everything you would imagine for a Southern California surf instructor. And one very memorable moment out on the water was I was by this wave that was coming. I said, oh, what about this one? Because it looked really big. And he stopped me and he said, no, never rush into a wave. As with life, be patient, be certain. I thought, damn that guy. I needed to sit with that for a moment. Cool young surfer dude was really speaking some truth to me. Never rush into a wave. In my words, be patient. Be on the lookout for the power sources you're supposed to be riding. There's no rush. I was so exhausted out on the water with all the paddling and standing up and contending with the power of the ocean. But I learned to relax a little bit more by the end and just kind of breathe and get in sync with the water and not tire myself out from tensing up so much. And one thing I noticed about this young, cool surfer instructor was how he looked out for waves to ride on the horizon. I always thought that clearly you look for the ones that are the biggest and the juiciest, but actually those are not necessarily the best to ride. Sometimes it's just a wall that crashes down very quickly. But he had developed eyes to see waves that are coming on the horizon that are longer, and you can ride them easier and for a longer period of time. And my point in sharing all this is how it's possible to find oneness and resonance with the wild ways of the ocean, as with the wild ways of life, humbly and joyfully so. This is a familiar gospel text to many of us, Jesus walking on the water. And one insight that I noticed this year that I hadn't noticed before is that in an account prior to this, Jesus had just learned of the beheading of John the Baptist, his friend and forerunner. He had just received this news from the disciples, and Jesus withdrew most surely to grieve, to be in his sadness. This is an important bit of context to note. Now, it's also helpful to understand that almost every gospel account is set within a relationship of training and formation between Jesus and the disciples. Looking back earlier in Matthew 8, you'll remember another storm on the sea. That time, Jesus was sleeping in the boat with the disciples. They were scared. He woke up and calmed the storm and told them not to be afraid. He was in the boat. You remember that one. But this time is different. This time, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat alone to go to the other side by themselves. He sends the disciples and he leaves them there for hours. One translation says that Jesus did not come to them until the fourth watch of the night, which is somewhere between 3 and 6 a.m. Now, one early writer in the church, John Chrysostom, said that Jesus then allows them to be tossed by the storm all night. This had the purpose of awakening their stony hearts in a most complete way. There you have it, straight from the 3rd century. Jesus is helping them stand on their own 2 feet. He is enlarging their comfort zones within uncomfortable spaces. He is helping them to see who they are and what they are capable of when they don't know yet themselves. So going deeper into the story, Jesus faced his own sadness on the mountain, and the disciples struggled in their fear on the boat. and there residing between them was the vast sea, both wondrous and terrifying. And out of his solitude, the story goes that Jesus bridged the gap towards them by walking upon the water. Now, appreciating this very powerful metaphor, I want to invite you to close your eyes for a moment. I invite you to stand with Peter on the edge of the boat, feeling the fear. He and the others have endured the terror of the wind and the waves for hours, and they're getting through, maybe just barely, but they're learning about themselves and what they're made of. But now Peter is invited into the absurd and nonsensical, to step directly into the tumults, into the abyss that threatens his life. And then he does the unthinkable. He lets go. He steps out into the stormy water, and amidst a cosmic exhale in his being, expecting to be totally submerged, there he stood, exhilarated for a few moments where he never imagined he could stand. You can open your eyes. Now think for a moment about our lives. Where are we being invited to step out of our boats today? Where are we being drawn into what feels maybe a bit absurd and nonsensical? May feel like a poignant risk or a step of trust or a birth contraction of movement and resistance. We may sink at first, but an indomitable hand of love picks us up always and always and always. Listen to this thought by Richard Rohr. He says this: the ego defines itself by its attachments and hatreds. The soul, our true selves, does not attach, nor does it hate. It desires and loves and lets go. It desires and loves and lets go. Where are we grasping and possessing rather than letting go? We can think about the relationship of our spouses or partners or friends or parents to children or to our possessions. Life on the boat will always have its important place, and yet could it be that God is always drawing us out into the water, into the wilds, where we find courage to live and love more freely? For me, it's like wrestling with the waves out on the surfboard for the first time. I felt like I had been through a spin cycle after I was done, but I also felt incredibly blessed to be out on the ocean with my firstborn son, a rare time with just one of my boys. It's a wrestling out on the water, and it's also a surrender to a power greater than us. So my point today is that there is an untamed dimension to life. Might we allow ourselves to get in touch with and be in awe of the wild? What we experience as rules, limitations, and boundaries never stays as such. And it's often in times when life reorders our boundaries that God breaks in. This is one of those times, perhaps in this pandemic and in other such disruptions in life. It is the moment today for each of us to discern where Jesus is saying yes, to live fearlessly even in these stormy waters, for that is where I am. I want to close for a moment with a little blessing and poem from John O'Donohue. This is called Axioms for Wildness. Alive to the thrill of the wild, meet the dawn on a mountain. Wash your face in the morning dew. Feel the favor of the earth. Go out naked in the wind, your skin almost Aeolian. With the music inside, dance like there is no outside. Become subtle enough to hear a tree breathe. Sleep by the ocean, letting yourself unfurl like the reeds that swirl gradually on the seafloor. Try to watch a painting from within, how it holds what it never shows. The mystery of your face showing what you never see. See your imagination dawn around the rim of your world. Feel the seamless silk of the ocean womb you in ancient buoyancy. Feel the wild imprint of surprise when you are taken in by your lover's eyes. Succumb to warmth in the heart where divine fire glows. Amen.